So in my 20 plus years here at Bethel, I have actually never gone back into my files for a sermon. People always ask all the time, isn't there a service or something? Or can't you just repeat something that you've said before? After all, we read it over and over again, but I've never done that. I like the experience of teaching for 10 or 15 minutes about what I'm thinking about from the week, and how the world has moved me and how the Torah is speaking to me that week. But today I want to update a sermon I first delivered at Parshat Vayikra, this week's reading in 2014. My message then continues to speak to me, and sadly it is still relevant in this moment, just as it was nearly a decade ago. It comes from a verse in today's reading, Leviticus 5, verse 1. If a person has sinned by speaking a curse and another person heard it and does nothing about it, does not act against it, then the witness shall bear the wrongdoing as well. Im lo yagid v'nasa avono. If you hear a curse and do not act against it, you will also bear the wrong. In other words, silence is a sin. This is just as relevant in 2023 as it was in 2014. And today, hate and anti-Semitic incidents are recurring in our schools. Democracy in Israel is under assault. And the language of division has overtaken too many of our politicians rather than unity and hope. In 2014, it was the week that Abe Foxman, the head of the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, had announced his retirement. Abe Foxman was and continues to be a voice which stands up against wrongs against the Jewish community worldwide. For 50 years, he has been a powerful voice, unafraid to stand up against the wrongs he saw. Today, the ADL is headed by Jonathan Greenblatt, a former Bethel member before he moved to New York for this position. Jonathan has also been a strong voice speaking up against the wrongs that we are facing. This week, the ADL released its annual audit of anti-Semitism in the United States. It is something to pay attention to. This is from their executive summary, and I just shortened it to take some of the statistical information for ease of reading, but it is all available on their website. It says in 2022, ADL tabulated a 36% increase from 2021, and the highest number on record since ADL began tracking anti-Semitic incidents in 1979. This is the third time in the past 5 years that the end year total has been the highest number ever recorded. Incidents increased in each of the major audit categories. Anti-Semitic harassment increased 29%, anti-Semitic vandalism increased 51%, and anti-Semitic assaults increased 26%. The vast majority of anti-Semitic assaults, 107 out of 111, were perpetrated without the use of a deadly weapon. This year, no assaults perpetrated against the Jewish community resulted in mass casualties. That's good news. The dramatic increase in anti-Semitic incidents in 2022, it continues, in almost all categories cannot be attributed to any one cause or ideology. Significant surges in incidents include high volume increases in organized white supremacist propaganda activity, up 102%, K-12 schools, 49% increase, and college campuses, 41% increase. Back then, Foxman wrote, "There is no erosion of shame about anti-Semitism as the Holocaust becomes more remote in time and as survivors pass away." He warned that in many circles it's no longer shameful to express hatred against Jews back in 2014. Foxman then, and Greenblatt now, has not been shy about naming anti-Semitism. This week, Dr. Monifa McKnight, superintendent of MCPS, held the second community town hall meeting addressing anti-Semitic incidents in our schools. At the same time, almost exactly the same time, Dr. Dodd and other school leaders needed to send out notifications of more incidents occurring in our schools. Dr. Dodd is the principal at Whitman. While some have suggested that some of the uptick is due to better reporting of incidents by the schools, and I believe it is true in part, incidents are on the rise. To our adults and to our students, we must push back hate back into the margins. We cannot stay silent. Im lo yagid v'nasa avono. If he does not act against it, we shall bear the wrongdoing as well. On Yom Kippur, we speak of the sin of omission, al chet shachatanu. We were silent when we could have acted. There are times in our lives when we could have or should have acted, but we opted to be silent. Our Parsha teaches us remaining silent when wrong is being done is not okay. It teaches me that I have done wrong when I have stood silently. I have done wrong when I have not stood up, said that it was not cool. That joke, that comment in the classroom or in the hallway or at the office. Im lo yagid v'nasa avono. The Parsha is teaching us to act. It is teaching us to use our voice when we hear a wrong being done, or if not, we're complicit in part. It is important that we use our voices regarding Israel as well. In 2014, I spoke about the Israel Apartheid Week happening on college campuses, which takes place this week each year. And again, this past weeks, it has happened again. Campuses have experienced the hateful and incorrect accusations against Israel. I spoke in 2014 against BDS, and I can share those remarks separately. But in 2023, Israelis are taking to the streets en masse for a different purpose, not against the outward enemies of Israel, but the elected politicians of the country who are undermining its own democracy. For 2 months, hundreds of thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets each week for peaceful protests against efforts to undermine the power of the court system. The efforts would, as reported in one place, prevent the Supreme Court from striking down legislation. We in America, with our system, we would call it the court system having the ability to declare something unconstitutional. Israel uses different terminology. It would change how judges are selected. It would allow a simple majority of the Knesset to overturn court rulings. These so-called reforms by the ultra-right coalition are weakening the rule of law, strengthening the religious and ultra-nationalists, and threatening the very economy and character of the country. The former governor of Israel's central bank, Jacob Frankel, has warned that when the rule of law is diminished, economic prosperity falls as investments move elsewhere. Israel, our startup nation, may lose that momentum by Bibi's effort to stay out of jail for his own misdeeds. A popular protest sign in Tel Aviv's tech sector says, "Ein demokratia ve'ein high-tech." It was reported on Thursday that, and I'm reading from the news report, Mr. Netanyahu, addressing Israelis on primetime television, promised to go ahead next week with plans. This is from Thursday. Mr. Netanyahu, addressing Israelis on primetime television, promised to go ahead next week with plans to give the government greater control over appointments to the Supreme Court, emphatically squashing rumors that had swirled throughout the day that he was about to back down. His speech capped a day in which thousands of protesters demonstrated across Israel against the plan, leading to confrontations with right-wing supporters of Mr. Netanyahu and clashes with police who sprayed protesters with water cannons. This is Israelis, spraying water cannons against Israelis. The address came just minutes after the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, met with Mr. Netanyahu to warn him about the effects the turmoil has had on the military amid speculation that Mr. Gallant himself was about to speak out against the plan. The number of reservists reporting for duty this month has declined, the military confirmed on Wednesday, amid widespread concerns amongst the reservists about the effect of the judiciary plan. It is threatening the very security of the state of Israel. The proposal would give the government more control over judicial appointments, weaken the Supreme Court by severely restricting judicial review of legislation, and allow Parliament to override court decisions, the news report explains. The plan by the far-right government has become one of the most controversial domestic issues in Israel's history, sparking weeks of angry protest by opponents who say that it would subvert the country's democratic system. It continues. The drama in the streets and the halls of power on Thursday followed in the wake of a vote in Parliament earlier in the day to make it more difficult to declare prime ministers incapacitated and remove them from office. Critics said the bill was aimed at protecting Mr. Netanyahu, who is on trial for corruption right now. And in the article, Yair Lapid has said, explained, or commented more accurately, like thieves in the night, the coalition has now passed an obscene and corrupt personal law, Mr. Lapid said in a separate response to the law's enactment. Im lo yagid v'nasa avono. On Sunday, tomorrow, a protest is taking place outside the Israeli embassy, organized by Israelis against these legislative efforts to weaken democracy. It is at 12:30 tomorrow. I, along with other area clergy, will be speaking, and I invite you to come. Our Parsha is teaching us to stand up when wrong is done. We must have the courage to stand up, even if we get into a little bit of controversy. And we must stand up even if we are pressured to stay quiet. And we must stand up because a younger generation is watching us and asking us, what are we doing? Im lo yagid v'nasa avono. I believe MCPS leaders want to do the right thing. I've been working very closely with Dr. Dodd at Whitman, and I know he is working hard to create a safe space for all, and that he wants our partnership to stop the hateful acts occurring. But we must not be passive. And I know my love of Israel compels me to speak up through speech and deed. So join me tomorrow and join me in our ongoing efforts with MCPS 2. Im lo yagid v'nasa avono. Shabbat shalom.